Now we start with the Fox News Alert this busy Friday news night. Welcome to Hannity. Now tonight we are at the bitter end of what was another horrific, terrible week for the Biden administration. But it's Friday, so you know what that means. Joe Biden is now kicking back for another restful weekend of ice cream away from the White House. Now, meanwhile, our country is falling apart. Biden's Treasury Secretary now predicting uncomfortably high inflation for at least another year. What wonderful news.
So I think there's a lot of uncertainty that is related to what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. And I do think that it's exacerbating inflation. I don't want to make a prediction exactly as to what's going to happen in the second half of the year. You know, we're likely to see another year in which 12-month inflation numbers remain very uncomfortably high.
Oh, so much for transitory. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, inflation is the single biggest concern for the American people. It's no surprise that nearly 60% of Americans are unhappy with Biden's performance. Well, no surprise to everyone except our cognitively impaired commander-in-chief, who seems to believe that his anti-energy policies, they've had nothing to do with rising energy costs, rising inflation, has nothing to do with government spending, nothing to do with his energy and economic policies. You decide.
I love, the Republicans saying it's Biden's gas pipeline. Biden said he's going to stop the Keystone pipeline, and I did. And that's the reason prices went up. Folks, let's get something straight here. The Keystone pipeline was 2 years away and had been 2% finished. Give me a break. So I'm sick of this stuff. We have to talk about it because the American people think the reason for inflation is government spending more money. Simply not true.
Simply is true, unless you're really that dumb, Joe, because you have to be really, really dumb to believe that. You know, Joe Biden is now, I blame all of my failures on Vladimir Putin Biden. That's not going to fly. Gas prices, as every American knows, were already way up before Putin invaded Ukraine. Inflation was already at a 40-year high before Vladimir invaded Ukraine. And by the way, the oil and gas market, that is a futures market, Joe. And I know that's probably a little too complicated for you to understand, especially in your compromised cognitive state at this point in your life. But according to Alberta's premier, you know that Keystone XL pipeline that you put the axe to? It would have been completed by today, and Canada would be sending us 900,000 barrels of oil a day. We can get it done in 8 months, and you won't have to be importing oil from Russia and begging some of the most unsavory characters in the world. Now, with that said, Canada is now telling us they can give us an extra 400,000 barrels of oil a day starting immediately. That means, Joe, you can stop begging OPEC like you have been, stop dealing with the corrupt, evil Iranian mullahs, stop begging the murdering thug in Venezuela, Maduro, because it's humiliating and it's embarrassing. I'd rather get it from little Justin and Canada. At least they're an allied country and they're not run by a murdering dictator, but a wannabe little dictator than Justin. Anyway, Democrats are opting for catchy slogans instead. Take a look.
You may have noticed this week that your gas prices have gone up. I want to talk to you a little bit about why. A lot of it has to do with Vladimir Putin.
You need to be honest with the American people. The battle for freedom has its cost here at home as well. People are already feeling Putin's price hikes at the pump.
The larger issue about Putin's tax, that's really Putin's gas hike. That's his gas hike. So much of this increase in the gas tax, gas price started weeks leading up to what happened there.
No, it's Biden's oil tax, and it's Biden's 40-year high of inflation long before Vladimir invaded Ukraine. Democrats out there with the little talking point, the little slogan, the little bumper sticker, all their lying won't work. But that didn't stop Joe Biden from tweeting that he will, quote, take every step that he can to minimize Putin's price hike here at home. Well, it's actually the Biden price hike. Now, it's a kind of weird thing to say since he won't restart the Keystone XL pipeline. He won't allow drilling in ANWR. He won't even unfreeze new exploration permits, and he's lecturing constantly the oil and gas industry that are doing their very best. As a matter of fact, we can't find a single thing that Biden is willing to do back here at home to lower prices. He'd rather beg the world's dictators. Now, he's willing to beg every single dictator, every despot in the world who hates the United States. He wants them to increase energy production in their countries. How is that any different in terms of how it impacts the environment? Interesting question. Now, needless to say, it's not going well. Gas prices, inflation, it's happened long before this invasion. It's going to continue to rise. Joe's economic and energy policies caused it. Now, Kamala Harris was asked about this serious economic issue. She had no answer whatsoever. Watch with your own eyes.
President Biden has said that Americans will feel some pain for the sake of defending freedom and liberty, but there does seem to be no end game in sight. How long should Americans expect? How long should we be bracing for this really sort of historic inflation and some unprecedented gas prices?
Sure. In terms of the discussions that the President, Johannes, and I had, they ranged in subject, including the issue of the Black Sea, and I'll let him explain in more detail as he would like.
Who's worse? Is it Joe or Kamala? That was a simple question to ask. And for the record, she never managed to answer the question. I don't know, between Joe and Kamala Harris, our country is being led by utter idiots at this point, and now the American people, we're all paying the price, and our national security is compromised on top of it. Joe's policies are hurting. Joe abandoned energy independence. Joe abandoned America as a net exporter of energy. Now we're a net importer by far. Now, prices have been rising sharply ever since he got into office. But remember, according to Joe and the Democrats, Joe Biden has nothing to do with this inflation that has been at a 40-year high for months. Forget the trillions of dollars in new spending, the trillions in handouts and entitlements. Forget the new restrictions on oil and gas and rising gas prices and energy prices. According to the left, this is all Vladimir Putin's fault because he invaded Ukraine 19 days ago. This week, our very own Peter Doocy asked Circle Back chief propagandist Jen Psaki if the administration was planning to blame Putin for everything that goes wrong in the U.S. until the midterms. Take a look.
Inflation goes up today. The president's statement blames the Putin price hike. Are you guys just going to start blaming Putin for everything until the midterms?
Well, we've seen the price of gas go up at least 75 cents since President Putin lined up troops on the border of Ukraine.
And last month, the statement didn't mention the Putin price hike. It mentioned inflation because of the pandemic. Why is that?
Well, Peter, last 2 years, there was a global pandemic.